Welcome back to The Haunted Beard. Thank you for joining me. So I have been making my way through the Exorcist franchise, and today I want to give you my review on Dominion, the prequel to The Exorcist. But before I get into it, it is all horror and thriller movie content on my channel. So listen, do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard. Dominion pretty much tells the exact same story as Exorcist the Beginning. We follow Father Lankester Merrin. This time he's in East Africa, and it's his first encounter with Pazuzu and how that encounter, the initial encounter, leads to the rediscovery of his faith. Now, being that this tells the same story from Exorcist the Beginning, I went into this with pretty low expectations, and that may be part of the reason why I feel how I do about this, but even so, I was pleasantly surprised with Dominion. This is by no means a great film, and it is a little rough around the edges, but I think this is a significant improvement on the previous film. Dominion starts off stronger. It opens up, and it is Germany, 1944, I think, and Lankester Merrin goes through the horrible traumatic experience where a Nazi officer forces him, more or less, to choose which people he wants to see executed right in front of his very eyes. And so by opening with such an intense and dramatic scene, it really kind of hooks you right in, and it gives you all the backstory that you really need to understand why Father Merrin is where he is, where his faith is where it is, and just kind of understanding his outlook and perspective on life. We immediately jump 3 years ahead. We're now in East Africa in 1947, and it picks up Father Merrin's already into the dig on this church that he found. He's contacted by the British military and also a Catholic priest. They're trying to get involved in the situation there, and we learn that Father Merrin is on a sabbatical from his priestly duties. While there are a lot of similarities between Dominion and Exorcist the Beginning, there are also some differences, and I think the film is better because of the differences. This is less of a horror film, really, and more of a character-driven story and kind of a drama as well. But I just found it to be pretty interesting and compelling. I think the film does a much better job with Merrin's character than the previous film. It makes him the center focus and really kind of centers in on his internal struggle and his battle with his faith and the doubt that he's going through. And I just thought, for the most part, it's pretty well handled. But being that this is an Exorcist movie, it is understandable why this would be disappointing to a lot of people. Yeah, you still get some of the exorcism and the demonic activity, but that really kind of takes a back seat to the central focus of Merrin's character. As I mentioned a minute ago, this film is still a little rough around the edges. One of the issues here is the CGI. And in doing some research, though, into some of the craziness that went on with the studio behind the scenes, the studio basically eliminated all of the visual effects budget. They took all the money away from Paul Schrader, so he couldn't really devote hardly anything to the visual effects. And so there's a couple shots here with some, again, really bad-looking CGI hyenas, just like the previous film. They look terrible, but how fair is it to criticize that point when, again, the studio pulled that budget right from under Paul Schrader, and so he couldn't really execute and present the film that he wanted to present. I also think the film does a better job in giving us more time with Father Francis, the young priest who is going to the Turkana village to start a school, as they use him to kind of be sort of the counterbalance to Merrin, as Merrin is obviously going through a season of doubt in his life, and the priest is there to help try to build up and restore his faith, and they get into some, I think, pretty interesting and thought-provoking conversations, and so I really like the way that they utilize the priest. There's a scene, too, where some of the children in the school that he's starting are massacred by the local tribe, and there is just a lot more kind of emotional and dramatic depth that is woven into the film that I think for the most part is pretty effective and pretty well handled. Also, the conflict between the Turkana tribe and the British military, it's established better and it's handled and written better, whereas in the previous film, it kind of just feels sort of forced, and it leads to this, I think, really out of left field sort of action war sequence that just doesn't really fit in very well. Whereas here, it just carries more emotion and dramatic weight to it. I also think the character of the doctor, which in this film she's called Rachel, she's just better written. I like that they, for the most part, largely avoid the romantic aspect of it. And they kind of tack it on a little bit in the end where it's more earned than it was in the previous film. I think even the set design in this is better, especially within the church when they finally open up the doors and get to walk into this church. It's pretty cool, and it kind of feels majestic, and there's all these murals and paintings all around that are really pretty beautiful and just loaded with religious symbolism and imagery that I found pretty cool looking. Another aspect is the jump scares. There aren't any, and I was pleasantly surprised that there weren't any cheap, lame jump scares. And I also think that the ending of the movie is handled in a much better way as well. It's by no means perfect. There are some parts of it that I don't think are great, but part of me wants to blame the studio on that for, again, kind of pulling the rug from underneath Paul Schrader and not really fully investing and going in on his vision. But what I like about the ending in Dominion is that, again, it's more focused on Merrin. He is the central thing. The confrontation with the demon is not about saving the boy and rescuing the girl that he likes, as in the previous film. It's really about confronting his own faith. And I think through this, and as well as some of the conversations between Merrin and Father Francis, the film brings up a pretty compelling, thought-provoking subject, and that is the problem of evil or the problem of pain. And it's interesting to me that the film opens up in Nazi-occupied Holland with Merrin going through that horrible experience where he sees all these people murdered in front of his eyes. And so that experience of seeing pain and evil and suffering was really kind of the stumbling block that led him down the path of doubt and abandoning his belief in God. And yet it kind of comes full circle when you get back to the end and he is confronted with evil incarnate, with a demon, seeing that demon face to face. It's that evil that actually brings him back to God. And so I just find that to be pretty interesting because it's true on both sides. Sometimes when people are confronted with evil and pain, they abandon belief, and yet other times when people are confronted with evil and pain, it draws them to God. And so I just thought that that was pretty interesting. And so because I think it handles this quite well, the moment where Merrin finds his faith again feels much more earned, and it just carries more dramatic weight to it. Whereas in the previous film, I didn't feel it at all. I thought it just felt totally flat and didn't work at all. But here, I felt it. I think it just works and has much more of an impact. And like I said, there are some complaints I could make with the ending, but a lot of it has to do with just sort of a visual perspective. I think the look of Che, who's the demon, he looks really kind of silly and corny. He's like totally shaved and like sparkling and glittery looking. And again, there's some bad CGI here as well, but I really don't want to criticize that too much just because of knowing what went on behind the scenes. It doesn't really feel like a totally fair criticism. Overall, like I said, it's not a great film by any means, but I actually found quite a bit here to appreciate and was pleasantly surprised. It's definitely, in my opinion, a significant improvement over the previous film. And it's just kind of an unfortunate bummer that we didn't really get to see the full representation of Paul Schrader's vision. And I get it because the studio wants all the special effects and all the demon craziness and all that. But to me, I just think this is a much more interesting and compelling story. If you can kind of just allow that to be in the background and focus more on what I think is a pretty interesting character, I just think this film is, again, significantly better than its predecessor. But I understand why some people may be disappointed with it. But for me personally, this may be crazy. I'm going to give this like you know what the heck? I'm going to go 7 out of 10 for Dominion. Like always, hit me up down below though. Would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. That's all I got for you. Up next, we've got the new Exorcist movie, Exorcist Believer. It's coming out in just a few more days, and planning on eventually seeing it. I don't know if I'll be able to see it right when it comes out, but I'm really going to try to see it in theaters and then do a ranking video with all the movies, including the new one for the Exorcist franchise. So that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.